Today we're going to solve this quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. The first step in that is to set the equation equal to 0. In order to do that, we're going to add 10 to both sides. That gives us x squared minus 2x plus 10 equals 0. As a quick note, we need to note that a times c in this problem is 10, and there are no factors of 10 that are going to give negative 2. So that will help us understand that this is not factorable and that we would have to use quadratic formula in order to figure this out. Now that we've got this set equal to 0, we're going to write our quadratic formula out. So this is going to be x equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now we need to identify a, b, and c. So a is the coefficient of x squared, which in our case is 1. B is the coefficient of x, which is negative 2. And c is the constant, and in this case we have 10. Now we want to plug this in. It's very important that when you plug these into the quadratic formula that you use parentheses around each of these. So we have a minus from the formula I'm going to carry down. B is negative 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so we have negative 2 squared, minus 4 times a, which in our case is 1, and c, which is 10. And then that's going to be all over 2 times a, which is just 1. Now I want to do some simplification here. So 2 negatives are going to give me a positive 2 plus or minus, and now I want to put all of this under the radical in the calculator at the same time. That keeps us from making some mistakes in simplifying. Now you could certainly do order of operations here, so you would have to do your exponent and then multiplication and then subtract. But I do find that many of our students do better if they just put this all in as one expression all the way across. Do not put the square root in the calculator. You're going to find out that some of our quadratic formula solutions will not be real solutions. So you may have imaginary, and calculators usually don't give you that. So we're just going to put in negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 10. And the calculator recognizes parentheses together as multiplication. And this is going to give us negative 36. And then we still have this all over 2. What we want to do now is simplify the radical. If I was to put this directly into our calculator, what happens? That gives a domain error. And the reason is because of this negative under the square root. And we just have to remember that the negative under the square root is going to give us an I. So if I take that negative off, I can figure out just what is the square root of 36, which is 6. And then the square root of negative, or square root of negative 1, is I. So this square root of negative 36 turns into 6i. And we still have all of it over 2. All right, let's talk about how to simplify this. Because this is imaginary, we need to simplify it in a very specific way. We want to have the real part come first and then the imaginary part. So we're going to separate this into fractions. I'm going to have the first term in the numerator, 2, over the denominator of 2, plus or minus the 6i over that denominator again, 2. This is completely legal in mathematics, so you can do this separation. Now simplify. So 2 over 2 gives me 1, plus or minus 6 over 2 gives me 3, and I bring over the I. And if your computer or whatever program you're using requires that you have two answers, you're going to separate it even further and say 1 plus 3i and then 1 minus 3i. And those two will be your final answer. So the most important thing here with the imaginary is that you do separate it into two terms, and that you simplify these two terms completely. Sometimes these will end up being fractions for each of these, not whole numbers. And you would just simplify those fractions all the way down in the most simplest form. So that's your two answers for a quadratic equation that's giving us two imaginary solutions.